Well, hello YouTube. Here we are with a bit of a bicycle tune-up video. In front of us here we have my single-speed Kona AHA bicycle. This is the one that we did the suspension fork changeover on a little bit ago. Well, now it needs kind of a spring once-over, a little bit of a spring tune-up. Obviously, airing up the tires, which most bikes do after sitting. This bike here, I don't know if the chain has stretched a bit, but it's a little loose. The back brakes have need adjustment. However, of course, they may not be able to be adjusted the way I want them to, because the rim itself has a little bit of run out. It probably should be trued, the rim itself. Sometimes, your bicycles get well ridden, well used. This one here is my trailer bike, so it does get well ridden and well used, and sometimes, like every work vehicle, sometimes it doesn't get the maintenance that it deserves. Of course, with a single speed bike, there is very little maintenance needed. You don't have to adjust the shifting, you don't have to adjust all the fine stuff on it. Really, you just make sure the brakes are good, the chain has oil, the pedals are tight, the wheels are tight, everything else is good to roll, pretty much. So of course, really, on these type of bikes, to tighten up the chain, you loosen off both left and right axle nut. Not, super loose, but enough that you can pull back on the whole rim assembly, taking the slack out of the chain. You don't want her like super tight, the chain itself, but you're having whatever that is, an inch of deflection is a little bit on the looser side. So pretty much with your number 15 flat wrench or socket, if you do choose to use it, pretty much loosen the rear nuts. Now they don't have to be super loose, just loose enough that you can pull the chain and take some of that slack out of it. Now some bicycles are harder than others to adjust the chain on. They require some special attention. The old school bikes, they actually had little adjusters that went around the rear dropouts that had a loop and a little eyelet nut that would actually pull the wheel back, for you. They went away from that, or at least this bike anyways never came with that, and I don't see them on the newer style BMX bikes, either. Sometimes a loose chain can be a sign of a wore out chain as well. If your bicycle has a lot of miles on it, it's an old bike, it hasn't been maintained to the letter, it does have issues. Sometimes a loose chain can be, like I said, a sign of bigger issues. When a chain gets worn, the links themselves start to stretch. They start to wear. You get deflection both left and right, deflection up and down. If your chain is rusty, it causes problems. You should probably change it out as well. Now on this bike here, you have, of course, the cross-top or V-brakes, where you have the cable that runs from the bars through this little eyelet down, of course, which makes the brakes themselves squeeze inward to grip the rim. So on the bike, the pad themselves should be in good shape, because that's what makes you stop. If they are almost flat or wore down, then of course you're going to have problems. They're not going to want to grip right. You're going to have a hard time adjusting the brakes themselves, or they're going to make like a squealing noise when they go to be applied. I just found something that I'm glad I caught. If you notice, there's a space between the little plastic. If you notice, there's a space between this little gray piece here where the spring is and the, well, brake itself. Well, this bolt is finger loose. It is in the process, if you want to say, of falling off. Now, sometimes to deal with something like that, you're best just to release the pressure, remove the brake altogether, let it flop on open. You can get a better look at the pads by releasing the pressure. Sometimes that little pin, little dowel will drop in the hole in the frame. Other times it won't, and you'll have to take the brake off of the frame, realign that little dowel, and then put it all back together. And then once the bolt is off, again, I will show you the one of the problems with the brakes. Because this bike is older, vintage, if you want to say, been ridden quite well, the pads themselves have seen a lot of use. If you see the wear marks on the pads, as well as the grooves in the pad themselves, are actually full of like debris, mud and gunk and stuff. They will not be performing like they should or really need to. What I'll do while I have it apart like this is I'll clean that groove, and then if the brake performance doesn't improve, then we will be replacing them. So of course this here is the little housing that goes on the stud of the frame. That there is a little nubbins that you line up with the holes. The spring itself goes into that little housing and then goes into the back of the brake, which allows it to have its tension like it needs to have. Right. Now, of course, by all rights, I probably shouldn't be using these pads again. I probably should change them on out, but I want to get a little more use out of them before I do. They're not down to the plastic or metal yet that is in there, but they are pretty close to being to be replaced. We will probably do a follow-up video here where we will take this bicycle a little further apart than what it already is, fixing some of the ongoing issues with it, and then it'll all be good. So after messing around for a few minutes, trying to adjust those brakes that were, whatever you want to call them, 3/4 wore out. You know, the springs are tired, the pads were wore out, they were needing to be replaced, refreshened. I went and dug around my junk pile of everything, found me another set of, complete brakes, as well as pads that weren't nearly as wore out as the ones that, they are replacing. So of course I changed all that out. Being mindful, of course, I gained the position of the little keeper versus a hole in the frame. Make sure you get the adjustment done properly for the springs. Make sure the cable's tightened on down. Really, the cable just runs on down through that little nut. You tighten it and make sure it's not pulling too hard. Now, when you transplant brakes from one bike to another, or even replace your old brakes pads with new brakes, make sure the pad itself is not too high or too low. If it's too low, it'll lock up in your rim, can lock up in your rim. Or if it's too high, it'll actually rub on your tire, wearing a hole through it, ending up with, a bigger headache. Now, of course, you can take your cable cutters if you want. Cut this little piece of excess cable, free, get rid of it. Or you can just tuck it on in, because you never know when you need that extra inch to get, what you need done. So once that's all done, of course, the front brakes are already adjusted. Everything else is good to go. We can throw some lube on the chain, and then, it's good to roll. Okay, so now all that's good and adjusted, we can move on to the chain. Now if you were dealing with a bike with gears that had the derailleur in the back, I'd recommend doing this step before you adjusted the shifting. What we're going to do is flush the back sprocket, clean the chain, all that area. So if this bike did have gears, all those rocks and grit and grime would be washed away, so they weren't going to interfere when we were trying to do the fine adjustment. Now unfortunately I'm all out of brake cleaner, but we do have carb clean. Be mindful of your paint when you're using brake clean or carb clean. Sometimes it does raise a little bit of trouble with the decals and things like that. So if you don't care about your own personal bike, then do it. If not, if it's a customer's bike or you want to keep your bike still looking pristine, you might find another method. Now, as you tell by that wobbling in the bike itself, the rim has, like I mentioned earlier, been really well ridden. It's out of round as well as out of true. So, you know, it should probably be replaced, but I'm going to get as many miles as I can with this bike before I give her a retire. So now I like to use, lithium grease. It works a little better than WD-40. WD-40 I find attracts dirt. So pretty much just doing the same thing. Take a shop rag, wipe off the excess. One, it'll keep it from getting, on your pants and such. Two, it just looks like a far better job, if you do it. If you wanted to, you could get, fussier and flush it until you didn't get any grit off, but again, this is a very well used, well experienced chain. It's never going to be perfect. So what I'll do now is give the whole bike a once over, making sure all the bolts and such are tight, nothing's come out of adjustment, nothing's broke, nothing's bad. Throw some air in the tires, and then I'll take her for a rip. Well guys, there we go. I did a little bit of a tune-up, a bit of a once over on the bicycle here. Of course, like you've seen, we upgraded the back brakes, got them working, tightened the old chain, gave everything a once over. Like I mentioned there, one day I will go through this bike, repack all the bearings, replace both front and rear tire and probably tube. They are not factory by no means, but at the same time they're not within 5 or 6 years old either, and they are cracking and checking, but not bad enough yet where I feel that they need to be replaced. The grips were replaced last year, but they're wearing out already, so I may have to change them out before I do anything else. The cables are still good, but again, if I find a sale on them, I will change those ones out as well. The pedals have been upgraded from the plastic pedals that it came with to more of a flat style kind of rat trap pedal that, is fairly strong and durable. But pretty much guys, this has been a bit of a once over and a tune-up on a Kona AHA single speed cruiser. And as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's World. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.